Hi, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads. Today we are continuing in the Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. In our last video, it was Friday, and the master was at the home of Lazarus, Miriam, and Martha, and he was having a conversation with Martha about her choice to stay in the kitchen and Miriam's choice to listen to what the master was teaching. He also had conversation with Joseph of Arimathea, telling him that it was his time to go to Jerusalem and asking him if he would please stay with him. And that's where we stopped. Now, Friday was not over in the story. There was just a break in the story. So we continue with Friday. As the sun was setting, the mobs of followers went over the hill peaceably, leaving behind in the gardens and orchards a snowy carpet of strewn flower petals. As darkness descended, Martha lit fires in the clay oil lamps on the terrace, and the servants set out a light supper before retiring for the night. The 12 were there, and young Lazarus, who looked pale and wan and had hardly spoken all day, and a few older women and the sisters themselves. The master's mother had sent her regrets, saying she could only come down from Galilee at the end of Pesha. When this small group was seated in the flickering light, the master had given thanks, and all were breaking bread over generous helpings of hot soup. Miriam stood and picked up a beautifully carved stone box that rested beside her at the table. She went to where Joseph sat near the master and asked him to hold the box for her. Then, without a word, she opened the lid and dug both her hands deep inside as the others at the table stopped speaking and looked up at her form, where she hovered there like an angel of doom or prophecy in the firelight. As she withdrew her full hands, at once the terrace and vineyard and gardens were saturated with a cloud of the overwhelmingly voluptuous aroma of spikenard. The ointment, as Joseph knew, was extravagantly dear. Hefting fistfuls of rubies and gold would have been less prodigal. One by one, the diners understood what was about to happen. Simon pushed away his meal and struggled to rise from his place. James and John, Zebedee, reached out to try to stop her. Judas leapt to his feet, but they were all too late. Joseph held the alabaster box and watched in amazement as Miriam, her face almost beatifically beautiful in this light, let the liquid ointment pour from her cupped hands over the master's head, where it trickled down his face and neck into his robes. The traditional sacred rite of anointing a king. Then she knelt before the master. She gestured to Joseph for the box, and pulling free the master's sandals, she took another double handful, again worth a king's bejeweled crown, and poured the liquid over his naked feet. In a gesture of complete submission and adoration, she tossed forward her magnificent silken tresses and used them as a cloth. She wiped the master's feet. Joseph and the others sat frozen in shock at this strange and horrid travesty, an almost sexual inversion of the time-honored ritual of anointment, but here conducted without the authority of a priest or state, and on profane ground, and by a woman. Judas, the first to speak, expressed a mild version of what was felt by all, that above and beyond the rest, There was the horror of throwing away with such abandon a complete fortune in rare ointment. We might have sold that ointment to aid the poor, he cried, his face black with anger. Joseph turned to the master, trying to understand. In the firelight, the master's eyes glittered, dark green. He was looking at Miriam, who knelt on the ground just beside Joseph's knee. He was looking at her as if he would never have the chance to regard her again, as if he were committing her features to memory. Why are you so concerned about the poor, Judas? The master said, never taking his eyes from Miriam. The poor you will always have with you, but me you have not always. Again, Joseph felt that awful chill. He felt helpless sitting beside the master, ineffectually holding the ointment box. But as if he'd read Joseph's thoughts, the master turned to him. Miriam will explain later what you need to know, he told Joseph in a low voice, his lips hardly moving. But for now, I want you to procure an animal for me to ride into Jerusalem next Sunday. I beg of you, do not go forward with this ill-advised scheme. Joseph whispered urgently, it is dangerous, and not only that, it's downright unholy. You profane the prophecies. Though I love Miriam, I must point out that no king of Judea has ever been anointed on profane ground, nor by the hand of a woman. I am not come here to be the king of Judea, my beloved Joseph. I have another kingdom, and as you've seen, I have another method of anointment as well. But I have also another request of you, my friend. By the time of the Pesach supper, many will be searching for me. It is dangerous to reveal where we will meet for that night's meal. You must come to the temple and bring others with you. There, near the marketplace, you will see a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him. Those are your only instructions? That we come to a place and follow an unknown person? Said Joseph. Follow the water bearer, said the master, and all will happen as planned. And now we're on Saturday. It was just after midnight when it happened. Caiaphas would never forget the moment when they came to awaken him, the knock on his chamber door as he stirred beneath the bedclothes, wondering what time it was. The sensation he felt then was one he'd heard of but had never before experienced. The hair actually rose up on the back of his spine. He knew something dangerous and exciting was about to happen. He knew, without being able to name it, that it was what he had been waiting for all along. The temple police, who guarded the high priest's palace, and his person too, stood outside his chamber door and told him that a man had come to the palace gates. Here, in a secured quarter of the town, and now, in the dead of night, hours after the Roman curfew was in effect, asking to see him. It was a darkly handsome man, they said, strong, with a craggy face and heavy brow. He refused to speak with anyone but the high priest Caiaphas on a very private matter of utmost urgency. He had no credentials, no appointment, and no explanation for his visit. And the temple police knew that it was their duty to arrest and interrogate the man or send him away. Yet, they somehow hesitated to do either. Caiaphas knew deep in his soul that he need not ask further questions. As one betrayer understands another, Joseph Caiaphas understood that he had known this man always, perhaps through all eternity. His servant wrapped him in the cocoon-like folds of his lush green dressing gown, and followed by the temple guard, he padded along the stone corridors in silence toward the chamber where the stranger awaited him. Caiaphas knew in his private thoughts that this was the moment of destiny. He knew that his hour had come. But later, when he asked about that night, interrogated really by the Romans and the Sanhedrin, it was odd, for that was all he could recall. His awakening in the dead of night, that march down the long hall, and the sense of personal destiny, which he never mentioned, of course, for it was nobody's affair but his own. The stranger himself, the encounter, was just a blur to Caiaphas, as though his mind had been clouded with drink. After all, why should he recall him when they'd met only for a moment, just that one night? The police took care of the rest. They paid out 30 pieces of silver for the job. How could Caiaphas be expected, so long after, to remember his name? Some fellow from Iscariot, he believed, though he wasn't even sure of that. In the larger perspective, though, thought Caiaphas, in the great tapestry that was history, what difference did it make? Only the moment was important. 2,000 years from now, their names would be like specks of dust blowing across a vast plain. In 2,000 years, no one would remember any of this at all. All right, and that is the end of Saturday. Sunday is in our next video. All right, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. Let me just say too, if I trip over my tongue or clear my throat or whatever, mistakes or blunders I happen to make, I hope you don't mind, because if I were sitting in a room with you, I couldn't go, wait, let me start again. I just have to keep going. So I want this to be as personal and as natural as can be, as if, we're just sitting together, spending time reading a nice book. So if I make a mistake, I'm going to keep going, and I'm just going to be me, and you're going to be you, and that's how things go. All right, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.